You develop an instant global consciousness, a people orientation, an intense dissatisfaction with the state of the world, and a compulsion to do something about it. From out there on the moon, international politics looks so petty. You want to grab a politician by the scruff of the neck and drag him a quarter of a million miles out and say, "Look at that, son of a bitch," by Edgar Mitchell.
All right, guys, welcome back to the Young Americans podcast. This is episode number 2, Space Exploration, Americans into Space. I'm your host, Matt,
I'm Joe.
and today we got a special guest coming for you, Ryan.
Hello.
All right, so that was a great quote you had, though, Gerald. Would you care to explain that to us? Go into a little more depth.
I think this quote was extremely perfect for our session and our topic today, which is going to be Mars exploration, state versus private in exploration. And I think it helps put the importance of the science ahead of the politics that is really an earthly thing. So I think this will help us discuss and put it in perspective of what we're talking about today.
Absolutely. So let's just dive right into it. We've got state versus private. So obviously, just to recap, we have NASA right now for the Americans, anyways. We have NASA repping it up for government or state, and we have right now, I believe, SpaceX is the lead for private.
I would say so.
And the Americans, I know there are a couple others, and excuse me for not knowing those, but really the lead right now is SpaceX.
I think most of them are relatively satellite-based, just small satellites.
Well, yeah, for sure.
Even moon exploration is
Fair
like
enough.
a thing.
Yeah.
But these small companies even is.
So really, what we're looking at right now is who's going to make it to Mars first, right? And you got a lot of bets. Some say NASA, some say private. My money personally is on private. All right. Elon Musk. I think our closest launch window is 2024. If I'm not mistaken, it's 2022, and then I think 2024. If I'm not wrong. And he says, "I'm going to take that window and I'm going to go to Mars." That's what he said. So he's ready to go in 2024.
And I think the guy is going to capitalize off it. I think he's an incredibly ambitious person with the
Absolutely.
technology of landing a rocket. Like the millions of dollars, his billions of dollars this will save. I mean, NASA hasn't even developed that technology. If they have, they can't afford to do it yet.
Yeah, and I mean, right now they are literally just saying it's a prediction. In the 2030s, we think we're going to go to Mars.
Right.
Elon Musk saying, "I am going to be going to Mars on my way in 2024."
Right.
That's pretty ambitious.
Yeah, it's like every time I look in the news, it's like, oh yeah, SpaceX is testing out a new rocket model, or oh yeah, they've shot off another rocket. It's like, geez.
Yeah, I mean,
realistically,
Yeah.
it's crazy.
Yeah. And so, another thing is private going to be, the torch for Americans getting back to the ISS. Because I'm sure, when we were all young, we obviously had the space shuttle, and that worked for many, many years. And then they decided to retire it, and now we're hitching a ride with the Russians. And I believe that's going to end very soon. But would our state astronauts be taken up by our private rockets? It's a good question.
Yes.
And then that would bring up, are we going to have private astronauts? Is that going to be a thing now?
I think it's just a matter of, can the government suppress the private sector? You and I were having this conversation yesterday over a cup of coffee, and we were discussing this episode, and we were talking about how they wouldn't want to unbalance the microorganisms or the life cycle on Mars, right? That's what the current
Exactly.
government scientists are saying from NASA or the study biology, department of biology, whoever it is. I think, just as you said, and when you're showing all these things, I think that it is a way to suppress the private, the SpaceX really. But
Well, absolutely. I mean, it obviously wasn't private who stepped on the moon. That was obviously state. The whole, space race in the 50s through, 60s, 70s, that was all government. That was all state. And when I read this article, it was, and excuse me for not having the citation, but it was essentially saying, they need to wait. They need to wait 10 to 15 years so the government scientists can do more research and collect more information about the microorganisms. Because if you go, you're going to, disrupt, or you have the potential to disrupt the life on Mars. And what's very convenient about that for them is 10 to 15 years is when they plan to go to Mars. So essentially you're saying to the private sector, you're not allowed to go until we go.
Right.
Except what law is stopping them? So I'm saying, let's go. Right?
I agree.
I think that. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I think it should be more of a unison thing. Like if one or the other were to land first, I think it should be a unison, because you could first off make sure you don't disrupt anything, and you can also get the private aspect in there. You could be like, oh yeah, my company sent the first rocket to Mars and successfully landed it. With personnel.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's an American flag getting planted either way.
Right.
We're not planting your BS Earth
be.
flag. Screw that.
Yeah, fuck that. But Donald Trump had a comment on SpaceX last year, a few months ago. It was fall, and I forget which speech he was talking about. He was talking about SpaceX, and it was right after the whole Blunt incident, Musk, right, whatever. But he said that he was not going to hinder their progress. He said they're going to get there for us, pretty much, right? I mean, once that technology is developed and they go there, I'm sure NASA's going to do something about it. They're not just going to let a private company own Mars. I mean, our government's not going to let that slide. They'll let them probably be there first, be the first one to plant the flag. They're scientists, they're astronauts. Okay, now you've done it. The government's going to step in, but
I think it'd also be like The Martian. How, like, I know it's a throwback, but
Martian's a great movie.
In The Martian, he's kind of like, oh yeah, it's international waters. I think it'd be more like that. Like, oh yes, you can have a small chunk of where your aircraft landed. Apart from that, it's kind of like, well, the rest is international.
Well, the government will get you for anything, right? I mean, Congress come up with some BS like, oh, it looks like you have a monopoly. Split your company into 4 different companies. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I mean, it'll be a Standard Oil again, and then those 4 companies become huge. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
But,
and I mean, just like landing on the moon with like the private sector, in my opinion, that's a good old-fashioned American way to do it. Given it's how it wasn't done in the space race. The first one, anyways. But I mean, it doesn't really just scream America when a state-funded program makes an achievement. You think American when it's the people doing it, right? Now, don't get me wrong. The government is run by people, of course, but it really is satisfying to see the private sector do something. People doing it because they have the freedom to do it. No one's making Elon Musk make these reusable rockets, make what he does and all the advancements that he does. No one made him launch his friggin' Tesla into space. No one made him do that. His money doesn't come from the fact that he does that every year. His money comes from the fact that he's a successful businessman.
He's an immigrant.
He's an immigrant.
Yeah. Right. So, I mean, and the circumstances are different, right? I mean, we have a space race going on, private versus state, within America. I mean, America got so bored of waiting for everyone else to catch up, we raised ourselves. So, the circumstances are obviously different, but I think it wouldn't be a victory for America. I think it'd be a victory for our ideology, right? Of freedom, of second chances, of a success story. And I think it'd really be a unifying thing. So
absolutely. I mean, if I can quote Mike Pence real quick here, I believe it was several nations now possess the ability to enter space. However, very few share our ideals of freedom, private property, and what was the third one? Freedom, private property, and enterprising. I don't know, business or something like that. Today is not my day for quotes. Sorry about that, guys. But anyways, it's definitely an ideals thing for when we go up into space.
We no longer have to go with the Russians. And honestly, if we were to do a joint Russia program, especially to Mars, that'd be a little iffy for me. I mean, especially recently with the tensions and the global state of the world. But maybe I'm just being ignorant and I'm not looking at the quote. Just
Yeah. Although, I mean,
politics are
the fact this is a whole new world, right?
Right.
Our world is so torn and so diverse and so sectionalized. I hope we can look at Mars as a new beginning, you know? So we're going to Mars, but let's be honest, we are all the human race. We are all from Earth. Let's come together a little more.
I feel like it's going to be like the colonization of Americas again. It's going to be, oh yeah, we're settling down here, and then it's going to be people start splitting off and making their own little countries and things, and then it'd be 2 different planets with two
not
different.
in our lifetime, I don't think.
Not
No, not in our lifetime, but like many hundreds of
They
years.
better
from now.
not tax my Mars whiskey. That's all I'm going to say.
But oh yeah, have a rebellion then, huh?
Oh, hell yeah. I'll make the Whiskey Rebellion look like a joke.
Unless it's like-
intergalactic.
Yeah,
Unless it's
I will
very,
make it the
well-
Intergalactic Whiskey Rebellion. Hell
Unless
yeah.
it's very, very well put together, I don't think any colonies on Mars within our lifetimes are. Within the future, I feel like any colonies we put on Mars will ultimately end up being their own government. Because it's like, who would want to take orders and demands from people living on
another
a
planet?
Yeah,
That's true.
living.
Yeah,
That is a
thousands,
very
yeah.
interesting
millions of miles away.
prospect. So,
I honestly think we could stretch on that to another episode because like
Oh, yeah,
that kind of
indeed.
Fair enough.
perspective, like,
you know,
I think that's excellent.
a promising era, an interesting time to be alive, and hope for plenty of scientific advancements. This has been the Young Americans Podcast, signing off.